This episode is sponsored by Squirrel Sisters. Squirrel Sisters is a health and wellness company founded by sisters Gracie and Sophie Tyrrell, who are on a mission to help you treat your health. As we all know, I love my food, but one thing I tend to struggle with is the balance between being healthy and indulging in quote-unquote snacks. I like to keep my sugar consumption reasonably low without restricting myself from tasty treats, and that's where Squirrel Sisters come in. They have a range of healthy snacks, bars and nibbles that can be found in stores across the nation, including Waitrose, Holland & Barrett, Selfridges, and online on Amazon. All their products are 100% natural, vegan, gluten-free, and made with the highest quality ingredients, and most importantly, do not have any added sugars. It's a win-win for all. My personal favourite is the Cacao Orange Energy Bars, which taste just like a Terry's chocolate orange, but without all the bad stuff. Follow the brand on Instagram at Squirrel Sisters. And now for the episode. Hello and welcome to the Crazy Sexy Food Podcast. I'm Hannah Harley-Young, a photographer by trade and a foodie at heart. Each week, I sit down and chat all things food with well-known foodies, industry insiders, chefs, and people who just love their food. Today, I'm joined by my wonderful, talented friend, Melissa Hemsley. Melissa is a self-taught chef, writer, and activist who came onto the food scene 10 years ago as one half of Hemsley and Hemsley with her sister Jasmine. Since then, Melissa has carved herself a wonderful career, speaking up about the really important issues we need to know about in the food world: sustainability, waste-free cooking, eating and buying seasonally, and making dishes that are deeply nourishing inside and out. Not only is she a beautiful woman, she recently launched her second cookbook, Eat Green, which I can personally vouch for as fantastic and delicious. A mixture of flexitarian recipes, quick, easy, and versatile for all, Eat Green is the epitome of what Melissa stands for. Eat well, buy sensibly, and nourish yourself from the inside out. Melissa, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, Hannah, what a joy. So
It's
nice to
so
chat
lovely
to you.
to see you.
That looks like a very cool, lovely, like a room to not sweat in where you are.
Well, actually, no, the window's shut and it's quite small and I am going to start sweating. Thank God this is not for TV, it's only for audio. But, needs must. But I really wish that we could obviously be together. It goes without saying that we are recording remotely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that we are all living through.
And we're okay. And that's the
And
great
we are
thing.
okay. We are okay. I always start my interviews and I ask, what did you have for breakfast today?
Oh, what did I have? Oh, yes, we had a sort of egg broccoli scramble.
Oh,
It was kind of soft already, and I sort of put it on to sort of steam, and then I overcooked it. And I don't mind a bit of overcooked broccoli. Like sometimes I want it with a bit of bite. I like it roasted. I like it fried, stir-fried, steamed, and it just over-steamed. But then this morning we did an egg scramble, and we just sort of threw it in. So not like a frittata because it wasn't set, but it was like wet, lovely, soft scrambly eggs, and then the broccoli sort of put through at the end. So it's sort of lovely little brunchy dish.
and how have you both been getting on during COVID?
We've surprisingly, I don't know why I say surprisingly, we've been surprisingly getting on really, really well. Well, I'll start off by saying hearts go out to everybody that has had terrible, horrible things happen, and all the amazing people that are looking after us. I feel lucky, fortunate, just cherish all that everyone I know has been okay. And aside from the very sad, tragic side of things, in terms of the getting on with it daily, we've been okay. I can't complain. We've been all right. I mean, lots and lots of my work has been, well, I would say 99% of my work has been cancelled. I feel lucky that I'd already got halfway through my book tour. But all my lovely summer festivals that I was going to be doing in Cornwall and Devon and visiting farmers and growers, and not only do I enjoy them because I get to talk about my book and what's inspired me, which is the farmers and growers, but it's also where I go to learn. So it's almost like my summer school that I get to find out even more. So But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, we are totally okay on a personal level and a work level. We're going to be okay. And actually, some silver linings that I think will come out of this is food even more being seen as not a fetish, not a fad, not a fuel, but actually sharing, community, mental health. It's soulful health. It's physical health. It's all the good stuff that I know you know.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, everybody knows. It's just
Yeah.
our priorities have slipped.
I am going to sort of touch on a lot of the subjects you have just mentioned in a bit, but I also just want to ask you in relation to COVID, what have you actually been eating? Have you been craving anything? Because I have been craving the most bizarre things, which I
Like what?
sort of, well, just I'm not really a huge sugar fan, and I've suddenly been eating everything sweet in the cupboards. You know, I'm much more of a sort of give me a packet of crisps and some olives and a cheese board, and now suddenly I'm like, I need chocolate, I need wine gums, and all these things that I never eat. And I don't know if it's boredom, anxiety, sort of the unknown, and I'm just sort of like finding myself gravitating towards the kitchen and sort of just foraging for stuff that is not good for you.
Did you love them as a kid? Are you going back to kid food, as it were?
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, I've coined this term that I actually quite like cardboard food. I don't know if that is a great way of explaining it. I could eat just like a few oatcakes without anything on it, or like I really like brown pasta with nothing on it. Just if it's in the fridge, I'll like nibble it. It's very bizarre. But I call it cardboard food because it's sort of like what a hamster would eat.
I'm just imagining a hamster.
She doesn't
saying,
even know what to say.
I'm imagining a hamster saying, "I'll take the wholemeal pasta, please, not the white one."
Oh, of course, darling.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I think a lot of it is boredom. What have I been craving? Do you know what? After we finish, Henry and I are going to go for a walk because I haven't even stepped outside today because it's just too hot for me.
Yeah.
On mine and Henry's first date, we bonded over the fact that we're like what we call super sweaters, like just sweat in the winter. I'm sure you know this from when I see you at events.
I do know this.
You come over to me and you say, "Can I take a picture of you in a minute?" And I go, not anytime soon. Just let me just throw loads of glasses of water on my face first. So we'll go for a walk, and what we like to do on our walks are plan what we want to eat for the week. So we'll base it around what veg needs using up from our veg box, what's in the cupboard that's getting a bit old. Or something that we've neglected, and then we'll start thinking flavor wise. Like, I'll tell you what I'm craving, like a banh mi, you know, Vietnamese banh mi, like noodle salad. So all the things from a banh mi and a noodle salad, and then we'll go, okay, so let's make that this week, and we'll probably make enough for dinner to make it for lunch too. That's what I've been craving. Pineapple.
Okay.
I mean, I'm quite I always think of pineapple as something like my mum. I realised that how spoiled I was because my mum used to cut up fruit for me every day. She worked like every day of the week, but she'd still always make me food and cut me up fruit and plonk it in front of me when I was doing my homework. And I've always thought that someone cutting up your fruit for you is just such a lovely expression of love.
It's very maternal, actually, I think, cutting up fruit and sort of like giving it to someone. It's lovely. And that seamlessly brings me into actually talking about your childhood. So you were born in Kingston. Your father was British and in the army. Your mother is Filipino. And you grew up in an army base. And I need to know all about this.
Well, I've only been to the army bases in my life that I've been to, obviously, so I don't know what they're all like. But this is more the one that I grew up in Kingston. It's by Richmond Park, so it's pretty nice in terms of location wise, and it's near, you know, it's in the heart of Kingston, which is now a commuter town. But it's just basically loads of army housing. All the housing looks the same, and we lived in this big cul-de-sac where it was really nice because as a kid you've got tons of kids to play with. And then when between the ages of 6 to 8, we lived in Germany in 2 different army bases then, and they were a bit less sort of set back from, say, a main road, you know, and again, just lovely sense of community. So now where I live in East London, I really, really like, and we moved to about 4 years ago, and you've been,
I have.
and I like it here because I get that same neighborhood feel. When I was growing up, the parent that was in the army was the dad. I don't remember any mums being part of the forces when I was growing up. We're talking years ago. So there weren't really any dads around. It was definitely mums and kids. And you would make a friend and then they'd disappear and move to Australia. So it's constantly. But maybe that taught me to make to enjoy making friends. But at the same time, when I look back, I think, gosh, it was quite strange. I think I was confident and not confident about making friends type thing.
Yeah.
But then when we got to we're a bit more settled, and aged like 11, we settled, and then I enjoyed getting stuck in at school and getting to know everyone and trying to be good at netball.
Oh God, don't talk to me about netball. What was your position?
In sports, you were just sort of shoved everywhere, even
Yeah.
if you weren't particularly into it.
To be honest with you, Melissa, I used to smack myself right in at goal shooter because that required me to actually run the least amount. Your mother is Filipino, so how did your parents actually meet? Because that's a really interesting mix of cultures that were going on in the house. And if your father was out of the house so much, she was obviously cooking all the time, and I'm assuming that's sort of where you learn a lot of your knowledge and and I guess where your love came from.
My dad was spoke loads of languages, and he loved traveling, and he would always in this last sort of 10 15 years of his life, because after he retired from the army, he then started working for the Ministry of Defense. He loved going to Georgia and Kazakhstan and Ukraine, and he would come back with loads of dried herb mixes and celery salt interesting mixes and books, and he would always try and get us to learn a bit more about that style of cooking, and I had never tasted it. And I feel bad because I didn't get excited about it like he wanted me to be. But now I know some amazing, like I know, do you know Olia Hercules? And I've tasted her
Why does
food.
that name ring a bell?
She's written a book. I'm just looking at one of them now. She's got one coming out called she's got one called Caucasus. She's got one coming out called Summer Kitchens. She makes beautiful food, and now I've got to taste it. It makes me think about. I realise why my dad fell in love with it and why he was encouraging me to learn. But it is really difficult when you've not tasted it or someone's not cooked it for you. So my dad couldn't cook a thing, but he would constantly say, "Oh, can you try this Russian recipe?" I remember he was obsessed with borscht and the beetroot soup, and he would always say, "It doesn't taste like that," but he wouldn't know how to explain how, and we were like, I don't know how it's supposed to taste, for God's sake. So then there's my dad's side, this kind of, make this side, and then my mum's side, Filipino flavors. So Filipino food is sort of a wonderful mix of that there's Spanish influence of bay leaves and black peppercorns and tomatoes, because it was a Spanish colony for so many years, and then there's like Chinese flavors in it, and it's, I would say, the overall way I would describe Filipino food, in my head, it's mum comfort food, but obviously that's because my mum is, but it's sour. It's like tamarind and vinegar, which I know you love savory, you said, but a lot of people that don't love savory are like, oh, I like a bit of sour, but not too much. But it's not overpowering. It's a wonderful one. There's obviously lots of sweet dishes and deep fried dishes and street food dishes, but some of my favorite recipes for my mum that my boyfriend Henry is obsessed with, and he's had to learn how to cook himself now because he can't get hold of my mum's food. Yeah, Henry's an amazing cook. It's chicken adobo, which is chicken braised in loads of soy sauce or tamari and vinegar and bay leaves and black peppercorns, like whole black peppercorns. There's one called tinola, which is garlic, onions, and ginger in a chicken broth, and then like loads of pak choy and greens. And
oh my gosh,
Filipino food is lovely. And you've got my book, so throughout the books there's probably about 4 Filipino recipes through them. And I really don't know enough about Filipino food. I've only been I went once as a child and then once 3 years ago, but I know my mom's Filipino food, so I'm trying every year to learn a bit more about Filipino food. And there's quite a few Filipino restaurants that have opened up in London.
I was just going to ask you, are there many restaurants in London?
Yes, there is. An amazing guy called Budgie. He had like a pop-up, and then he's just opened just 3 months before lockdown, but we must all go and support him. It's called Sarap, Sarap, and it's in Brixton Market.
Oh, that's incredible. Oh, well, once I'm out of lockdown, I will be going. Yes. I mean, it obviously goes without saying that food clearly played a very important part in your life growing up. So whilst you were growing up with your mum, and I'm sort of talking really about your childhood here, were you showing a huge interest whilst she was cooking these dishes? I mean, were you in the kitchen with her? Were you asking questions? Were you mucking in? Or was it just sort of the food's on the table and I'll eat it?
It's mucking in the sense that very much, you know, in an army household, there was always, I'll tell you one more thing my dad brought to the table, same as my mum, frugality and thriftiness and resourcefulness and this idea that you would never waste food. So that's definitely come from both sides of my family. But I definitely mucked in as a child, but not in the kitchen. So clear up and all that kind of stuff and laying the table. I mean, laying the table doesn't sound like a lot, but I mean, I had my role to play, laying the table, clearing the table, helping clear. But in terms of the cooking, my mum, you know, she worked so hard. It was very much when she came home, she'd shut the door to the kitchen and get on with it. And she did not want us in the way. So I don't remember ever doing anything, but I do always remember knowing. And on a good day, I was, because, you know, when you're a kid, sometimes you can be really spoiled. You're a spoiled brat. You expect food, expect shopping, expect food. Yeah. You know, on a good day, I'd be like, wow, my mum's really good at making something out of nothing. And I remember when you get to that stage where I do remember there like kids coming around my house and then being like, oh, what's that? Or like, that smells, what's that fishy smell? You know, it would be the fish sauce. And I'd be like, oh, mum. Or, you know, my mum would fry fish for breakfast and someone would be like, you smell. I'd be like, oh, this is so embarrassing. But then when kids get a bit more adventurous, because it's different. Some kids eat everything. Some kids like simple flavors, which is, you know, they have different types of taste buds. I remember at a point when people would come to my house and they'd be like, your mum's food is so good. And I'd feel really proud of her.
Yeah. They finally came round.
But it's funny because, you know, you I don't know if you ever felt like this, like especially when at certain schools, like, you know, people didn't have friends whose mums were Filipino, and they you know, kids are curious and they say what they think. They just, you know, they'd be like, oh, that's smelly, and I'd be like, oh God, you know, I'd feel really self-conscious.
I've got the Iranian side with my mum, and, you know, she would cook Persian dishes. And I actually, it wasn't even just necessarily friends making comments if they came over to the house, but I didn't actually have the vocabulary to explain what was even being made, because how do you explain things like saffron and dried limes and crispy tahdig rice in a rice cooker to kids that, you know, kids whose knowledge is very much sort of like 2 potatoes, some peas and a bit of gammon or something, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it was a really eye-opening experience, I think, for the people that might have come over to my house. 100%.
I remember a few funny moments when my mum would be like, don't be ashamed of me, and I'd be like, I'm not, mum, because I deeply wasn't. I was just, you want to be the same, you want to eat the same as other kids. But then I quickly realized how absolutely delicious I knew my mum's food was delicious, but when other people said it, I would be very proud. And my people that have met my mum or had her food, they always say, can we have Filipino food? And I'm, as I say, ashamed to say I don't know too much about it. That's going to be one of my plans. But also my mum is so annoying, love you mum, because she won't ever give me a recipe. So any recipe she's helped me with that's Filipino inspired in the book, I always say to Henry, he says every time I do a book, he's like, please don't do a recipe with your mum because you're going to pull your hair out. I'll be like, mum, what exactly do you mean by adding this here? And she changes it. And there's one, Jazz and I did this TV show years ago, and there's an episode where she turns up in it. Turns up as in it's all scripted that she turns up. But she taught us this recipe. It had been printed in a book. It was like a year after the book came out, and in the show, in the middle of filming, when there's one take only, time to do it, but small budget, she goes, why are you doing that to us? And we're like, you told us to, mother. She is a character.
I have actually had the pleasure of meeting your mum, and she is a wonderful person. I just want to ask though, so because when I asked you the question, you actually were shaking your head when I said, did you have that interest in food? So there was no interest really at that time?
I interest in terms of yes, I love the deliciousness. Yes, I just know I wasn't interested in learning how to do it, but I did. I'll tell you what I did do. I loved Ready Steady Cook. That was absolutely what I watched every single night. I loved Jamie Oliver, and I loved Nigella, and I loved Gary Rhodes. So I like to watch it. I think probably if I really think about it, if my mum had said, here's a bit of time, here's a knife, I'm going to help you with it, I would have got more involved. But there just simply wasn't time because she was always working. And, you know, when the dad's away a lot of the time, she's looking after us by herself. So I didn't. And I didn't really start cooking until I left home about 18, 19, when I started to cook for mates who would let me sleep on their sofas or share a bed with them when I started working. And I would be like, right, well, I need to cook them dinner to say thank you. Didn't have much money, and I just started cooking. And I think it was a great way to learn, because I got to make lots of mistakes and I got to work out what stuff you need to stress about and what stuff you don't.
Absolutely. And may food be the currency that we all sort of move around in.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yes, exactly.
And you and Jasmine then obviously got together, and correct me if I'm wrong, you started cooking for photo shoots and for people and a few celebrities as like private chefs, and that was kind of the birth of Hemsley and Hemsley.
Basically, we started cooking for one individual, and we sort of fell into that because Jazz and I were both cooking and helping our friends. So I remember I left home and I would call my mum and Jasmine, and I think Jasmine, as the older sibling, definitely had to do more hands-on cooking if mum was working late. And Jazz, I guess all of three of us are good at putting things together, and I think that's what cooking, the best skill for cooking is what have you got in the cupboards, and having the confidence to put something together. And that's the things I try and help people with the most, rather than another recipe for this pasta dish or another recipe, all of which is fabulous when you have a craving for that dish. But I think this element of putting things together. Anyway, so we started to cook for our mates, and lots of our generation at the time, my generation and hers, because she's older than me, we were the generations that stopped having home economics or cooking, and lots of people didn't cook and didn't have the confidence to cook, and I didn't have any money to go out and eat at restaurants, and so I was cooking a lot and cooking to say thank you. And long story short, we started cooking for one individual who was in a band, and then the main thing I think that people really wanted from our catering company, which became Hemsley and Hemsley, was food that felt special enough that it didn't look fancy, but it felt special enough that it felt like a nice occasion to sit down when you've worked really hard for your dinner, but also felt soulful and comforting enough that your mum or your best friend made it for you, or you could make when you had the time to do it. And then, they were actors and musicians, and they were going on tour, and they wanted energy, and they also wanted ideas for snacks. Basically, just like us, we want to be energized, we want to feel special, we want to feel comforted, and we want really nice snacks too. I've been thinking about snacks a lot today, actually.
This is what I'm saying. I just can't stop eating. I think actually what was so lovely about you guys is that around the time that it was sort of really taking off for you, there was that period where people were becoming a lot more educated in terms of what they were putting into their bodies. And I couldn't go without mentioning our mutual friend, lovely Shelley, for introducing us, because I've got such a funny story, and you don't know this, about how I was introduced to you. You obviously know good old Paradise in Kensal Rise, and I think it was your birthday that you were having in Kensal Rise, and Shelley invited me because I'd just moved into the area, and she said, listen, it's my mate's birthday, come down. And I was like, oh, I just really don't want to go out tonight, I'm tired, whatever. Anyway, I sort of like dragged my feet and came down the rise, and Jasmine had made you this beautiful chocolate birthday cake.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the cake was presented to you, and it was cut up, and I was given a slice, obviously, because I don't say no to cake ever. And as I was eating it, Shelley came over to me and she was like, what do you think of the cake? And I was like, it's amazing. It's a chocolatey, fudgy, fabulous, full of goodness. And she was like, yeah, it's got avocado in it. And I said, what? She was like, yeah, there's avocado in the mixture. And I was like, what do you mean there's bloody avocado in the mixture? Because this was just sort of at that time where we were starting to find alternatives, and you were realistic about it. You were realistic about eating good, nourishing food without it being to the total extreme where you're just restricted from everything that you kind of want or crave in life. And so anyway, the point is that I was introduced to this avocado chocolate cake, and I think you blew my mind. And I was like, well, I've got to be friends with this girl now.
Oh my gosh. I think that was 10 years ago.
I think it was around 2012, because that's when I moved
so 8
to
years
Kensal
ago.
Rise.
Okay, so, yeah. And if I remember correctly, that it was shaped like my head, and
Yes.
the icing would have been the avocado, my hair, my fringe. You would have had chocolate avocado icing.
Yes, that
but
was
then
it.
the sponge was, did she tell you this bit? The sponge would have been made out of cannellini beans. Did you know that bit as well?
No, see, there we go. But this is what I'm saying. But you wouldn't have known.
Yeah,
you
it
would
was
not
yummy.
have known. It was fabulous.
Oh,
it was
that is
so
a good
delicious.
story. I like that. Yeah, I haven't had a cake like that since, I've got to say. This was it. So we did very simple soups and stews, and we used to make crackers, and like you said, cardboard food, like things you want to dip hummus into, and we used to make these pea dips, and we used to make crackers out of chickpea flour. And then for a showstopper, we would make, and Jasmine's friend Chanel, who I don't know if you've ever met as well, was such a good baker. She would help us make the cakes for people's birthdays and the bands and the actors' birthdays and weddings. And we realized that we were good at it. When you just realize you're good at it, like the things you're good at, Hannah, in different areas of industry.
I'm obviously good at everything.
You're absolutely smashing it at everything. But this is it. But isn't it funny when you realize you're good at something and you're like, I'll give it, I'm doing it. And of course I'm good at it because I'm working hard to be good at it because it's a job. But you realize it somehow feels you're making a lot of effort, but it also feels effortless at the same time. It feels like you're meant to be. And I remember the first day that I cooked for our first client, this one particular man was like, but you've done a day. This is exactly what I want. And I remember just sort of walking down sort of a street in Kensington, like skipping and feeling so happy. I was like, oh, I can cook, because I didn't know at that point. I basically massively imposter syndromed myself out of it. Well, I was like, I haven't been to cooking school, so how can I cook for someone and then pay me to cook for them? But it wasn't, I had a natural way of cooking, and I think almost all of us do, which is that if you get vegetables when they're at their best and in season, and you cook them in the way that you like, we all have different ways we like food to be, then you can't really go wrong. And it's lovely to have, we work so hard, and I know that I would never, nor would Jazz, have realised that when we were cooking like that, we would be having cookbooks and doing fun things and having a cafe in Selfridges. But at the same time, sometimes I do think, I'd love to go back to that. And when I go and have my days cooking now, which mainly are days, obviously not now, but before all of this, cooking for the Felix Project, the food waste charity, or cooking at a community centre, every time I do those days, I go, God, I need to cook more. I need to actually cook more and feed people, as opposed to cooking at home and recipe testing and writing for a book or writing for a column, which I love too. But I think it's important to get stuck into stuff.
I agree. It's the essence of cooking, of making something, and getting your hands dirty.
And working as a team. Yeah, I miss.
Absolutely. Obviously, now you've embarked on a personal journey as a chef and writer. What was sort of your initial angle as you started taking this path? Because as I said in the introduction, you really stand for some very important things, such as sustainability and sort of this waste not, want not attitude, which is so important and current right now.
Social media, and I would say specifically Instagram, because I find myself spending more time on Instagram than the other channels. I just realized that the best thing to do is this write about, and it just seems so simplistic and makes sense, but write about things that interest you. So I post recipes of food that I'm either eating, or I'll go, gosh, I found this picture on my phone from last summer, completely forgot how good that recipe is, going to make it, and I'll post it and say, I'm going to make this tonight. And then that's what makes me happy. And then people's comebacks and comments, and it's all about the comments and the chats that are sparked off this post, will be something along the lines of, they'll say, this recipe looks amazing. Gosh, didn't know you could eat cauliflower leaves. Now in my head, that's quite obvious, but actually 5 years ago, or 10 years ago maybe, it wasn't obvious to me to eat cauliflower leaves. And then that will spark a conversation about which parts of the vegetables you can eat or not eat. Or I'll say something like, use a quality cheese. And literally someone said to me today, what do you mean a quality cheese? I'll say, great, I didn't explain that very well, which I didn't to that in my post. And I'll say, check out this link where I link to farmers who are making cheese in the traditional way, or maybe a quality distributor here who gathers up and acts as a distribution center for lots of little cheesemongers and who don't even have a social media presence. or we'll start talking about food waste and then we'll bring something else into it. And sorry, I sort of rambled that point, but I feel now even more so that if I'm going to put a recipe up, and as you know, putting content out for free, it's part and parcel of what you do. So obviously the ways you earn money is, don't earn huge amounts because I'm no Ottolenghi or Jamie Oliver, but you take...
One day, darling, don't worry, it's happening.
you don't earn a huge amount from your books, but you earn, it keeps you going. But what you do need to do is offer free recipes, which I love to do, because coming up with recipes is easy because it's what I'm eating at home. But now I've decided, and it came through just plodding along, as it were, is that I'll always write at the beginning of a recipe why I'm putting this recipe up. So whether it's giving a tip around not wasting food, or I'm shout out to a particular small producer, or I put up a salad and then someone messaged me and said, you know what, with schools closed and restaurants closed, there is a real abundance, as in about to rot, of asparagus and tomatoes and cucumbers. Could you share more recipes on those? So now I'm like, okay, great, I will. So more recipes on that. And then that feeds into, so whether sometimes I think people might get turned off, like, oh, I just want to make dinner and I want inspiration. Do we need to have a whole chat about sustainability right now? So my thing is just weave it in, because it is all sustainability. Sustainability is for me, it's so hard to define it, but it's like having the best intentions in all areas of my life. So trying to keep things, you mentioned avocado from when we first met. I'm really trying to not give recipes with avocado, because I think we got to the point where avocados are absolutely delicious. And I think in my childhood, I probably ate one when my mum smashed it up, covered it with sugar, and tried to pass it off as ice cream. And I hated it. But, the more we eat, if we eat too much of one thing, especially if it's not grown locally, we're not leaving room for other things. And so in my last book, I tried really hard to focus on veg that sometimes gets overlooked, like the parsnips and turnips and swedes, and then the parts of veg like radish leaves I'm going to start banging on about now, because people like radishes, but then what about those lovely peppery radish leaves? Delicious.
Absolutely. But why has it become so important for you? I mean, obviously, we as an entire nation on this planet have to start being a lot more aware of our overconsumption of waste. I mean, I'm not just talking about food, but obviously for the conversation we're having, food waste is quite atrocious in certain places. And I guess, I mean, even with current day, with what we're going through with this pandemic, I think that it's massively changed the mindset of how we buy food and ingredients and what we do with it, and then what we do or don't chuck away. And I think that's what you've been very successful at doing, whether it's this sort of like fridge foraging and making a big sort of egg tortilla and just shoving in all the bits of veg that were at the bottom of the drawer. I think that's what you've been very successful at doing. Oh, hello, Nelly. Melissa's dog. I think that's what you've been very successful at doing, would you say?
Well, going back to what you said right at the beginning, is I don't think that I was thinking about sustainability and the climate crisis nearly enough, like most of us were. We knew that it was all hotting up. We knew we had to stop using plastic straws, but it didn't feel like it was being talked about enough that we had to get our shit together, if I'm allowed to say shit on your podcast. And then I so am. And then I guess about 5 years ago, I don't know what the big moment, there wasn't a big moment. And because I didn't go to cookery school, and because I have never grown up in farmland or understand growing, I wasn't afraid to ask very basic questions from people like, why are you doing this? And what happens next? And why aren't you doing it like that? Or what does this mean? And I found it fascinating. And so I know that we all do. And I was laughing so much the other day, because one of the best parts of my year last year was going to Country File Live and doing a demo, and then being on the National Trust stage. And then I got to do a talk with Anita Rani, where I met Anita Rani, who I love, and various other Country File presenters. And I was just looking around and going, 3 years ago, I would never have watched Country File. I would have watched it if it was on, but I wouldn't have, sought it out. And now the podcast that I listen to when I'm cooking dinner, like Farmerama,
Amazing.
you
What a
know,
great name for a podcast.
it's a great podcast, and I love them, and so I want to share those people, and I want to know as much as possible about them. And as you say, waste of all kinds. You know, when you're wasting food and throwing food in the bin, of which apparently the UN says a third of all food produced is thrown away. You exactly what you said. You're not just throwing away food; you're wasting all the resources that went into the growing, the distributing, every stage of its life till it ended up at you. And then I don't know who said this quote, and it's a good one, so I should find out. But when they say when you're throwing things away, there is no away. And we know that. And, you know, the BBC One documentary War on Plastic with Hugh Fenley-Whittingstall and the amazing Anita Rani, he goes to track where our shopping bags are ending up. And actually, I remember, I think I read somewhere that one Filipino island shipped back all the plastic waste that had got shipped to them because they were like, we're not dealing with your plastic waste. So
wow.
and then, you know, I started the sustainability sessions. They ran for about 10 sessions every Monday over the autumn, last autumn gone, in real life. And they sold out so quickly. And we, you know, I paid the speakers, and then a third of all the ticket price went to a different charity related to it. So my first one was Grace Dent, the food critic, Sky Gingle, the acclaimed chef, and Anita Rani, the TV presenter and slow living champion. And we talked about food, and then we gave a third of the ticket price to the Felix Project, who I mentioned before.
How lovely. So I've actually done some work with the Felix Project.
Have you, Hannah?
Yeah, they're what a wonderful organisation. I guess also in a way, when you decided to write Eat Green, this was kind of all of these thought processes that you've been talking about was sort of you putting it into a book for all of us to then sort of really start putting it to good use in terms of us cooking at home. And I think that's why I love the book. And, you know, this whole sort of term flexitarian, which I call myself a flexitarian. My friends think that I'm a twat, but, you know, and a lot of people probably sniff their noses at it. But you know what? Like, we need to be mindful about how we are eating and what we're choosing when we go and do our food shops. And I think with the book, why I have enjoyed it, especially during this time where all I can do is cook and not go out to my restaurants and whatnot, is that you allow for the versatility. So if I want to add fish into my favorite halloumi salad, or I wanted to add a bit of chicken, I could do that. It also works perfectly without. And I think that's how I would love everything to kind of move forward, is that you have your options.
I like how you said versatility, and I was thinking, imagine if you called yourself a versatiliterian to your friends. How much of a twat would they think you were then? I mean,
do you think that you've just coined the new one?
I think so. I think versatiliterian. Yeah. Oh, wow. It's so interesting what you say about food labels, because I mean, I don't sit there and go, I'm a flexitarian. If someone said to me, try and describe how you eat, it's so difficult to describe, and also I don't think it's not important, because it feeds exactly, no pun intended, into what we're saying, which is it's important to talk about where our food came from. So in a way, if someone said to me, how do you eat? I would say, I try to eat sustainably as possible, as close as nature as possible, by knowing as much as possible about the people that grew and farmed my food, and try and buy direct from them as much as possible. I mean, all of that, trying to get it into this one word. I think vegan and vegetarian are so important when you're at a restaurant or now ordering online, because it shows people exactly what you absolutely can and cannot have and do not wish to have. I love vegetarian.
That's all I'm thinking about. That's what I'm going to be.
Yeah, because you've slightly, you know, and it's a memorable word, because swapping things in or out. I mean, if I could have, you know, what other words could I have? I'm trying to think of all the names we didn't go for instead of calling it Eat Green. At one point, I wanted to call it the Flexible Kitchen. And they said, it's not a yoga cookbook, Melissa, because I was trying to bring in exactly that flexible, swapping things in and out, versatility, variety as well is the big word, and also the bits that I think people love the most are almost the bits that people probably don't know are in the book, or maybe haven't even found in the book yet, which is my favorite bits that I had to fight so hard to keep in the book, because there's always too many pages that you want to put in a book and things have to get dropped. And I mean, I wish I could actually, I might start putting up emails from me and my publishers where we write things to each other or text each other towards right at the end, publication day. I'd also just fallen down the stairs and had to go by ambulance to A&E the 2 weeks before my book.
Very bad fall.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my publishers were like, Melissa, we don't want to upset you, but all the emails start with, please don't cry, but, or me going like, I'm going to cry. And not in a sport way, but these are very real things, I'll tell you. At one point, the seasons guide was going to get cut because there was no space for it. And in the seasons guide, I go from early spring, late spring, all the way through, obviously, to early winter, late winter. And I'd asked farmers like Guy Singh Watson of Riverford Organics, who wrote the foreword to my book, and I'd asked various farmers if they agreed that my seasons were on point. And they said, we all disagree. Even, people would say, me and my farmer next door, because it depends on the climate and what's going on and exactly where you are. But yes, in general, this is what a seasons guide looks like for the UK. And my publisher said, we're going to have to cut it. And I said, but no, because people say they want to eat more seasonally. And if we don't give them a guide, then how can we encourage people? I personally have my seasons guide printed out and stuck, the same one that's in the book. I know people that have taken pictures of it on their phone and they use it for shopping. And I know people that would have it at their desk at work. And then at the back of the book, the A to Z of odds and ends, all the ideas that I couldn't put into recipes because there's not enough space. What do you do with the ends of an asparagus? We're all eating asparagus at the moment, but people are sort of, and I used to do this, snapping off the asparagus end, and maybe a quarter of a third of the asparagus is going in the bin or hopefully the compost. So I came up with a recipe called bottom soup, which is for the asparagus bottoms, and you make a lovely creamy green soup. They just need longer to simmer.
You've just given me a great idea.
You're gonna make bottom
soup. So much asparagus in the fridge.
Do it.
And I have to say, but don't worry, it does go into the compost. I do cut off the ends because I find them too tough to eat.
Yeah, so give them a little simmer. Something, sometimes the very, very end is still too much, but you can simmer it, and then you can blitz it. And if it doesn't want to blitz, if it's too stringy, you can just discard it. But you get, even if you don't get soup out of it, making asparagus stock to then flavor a risotto or flavor a lovely noodle broth is amazing. But I love a handful of frozen peas thrown in at the end to a saucepan that's just had simmered asparagus stock, and then maybe a dash of cream or a dash of oat milk, whatever your milk is, and a bit of mint or basil, and maybe some chives on top. My gosh, delicious.
Ooh. Well, there we go. I might be doing that tomorrow.
Do it. I'm still learning, and there's loads more people just like me, and I know lots of other people who haven't talked about sustainability as much, and are now like, we are with you. Let's all talk about all of these issues. I mean, there's so many. It can be refill, it can be plastic-free shopping, it can be local shopping, it can be seasonal shopping, it can be like Tom Hunt, who has the term root to fruit. It can be championing restaurants that are zero waste. There's so many different ways we can all try and be more sustainable.
Something that you actually, we both kind of mentioned at the beginning, is the link between food and mental health. How do we eat to feel good? Is it simply just eating your fruit and veg and making sure you've got a colourful plate in front of you? Or is it a little bit deeper than that?
So it's much, yeah. It's very, very complicated. And I think as someone who's not a nutritionist and not at all medically trained, to say that only in my experience, and I'm an ambassador for Bryony Gordon's Mental Health Mates, and we had a whole, interestingly, one of the sustainability sessions, I told you they all sold out. The one that sold out in seconds was the mental health one. And that was with Matt Haig and Bryony Gordon and Paul Nabel and the Mind Medic.
I love those. I love all of those guys.
They're all amazing.
They're amazing.
For everyone listening, do give them all a follow because they're brilliant. And what we all agreed was, talking from a very personal point of view, is that cooking and eating is very powerful. Eating I'm going to say the same things again, eating a wide variety of foods, considering foods that we don't maybe eat enough of, like oily fish and dark leafy greens, which in my head are like the ones my mum used to bang on about all the time. Like I told you, she'd fry me up mackerel for breakfast. Oily fish, dark greens, but your everyday veg have all got their pros and advantages and greatness too. So, but it's about eating a variety. But then on a cooking level, I think on a personal level, on a cooking level, being able to feed yourself, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but finding a recipe that you enjoy the thought of, because I think so much, like I told you, me and my boyfriend love going for a walk and thinking about the food we're going to eat during the week, and we're not talking about fancy food. I don't consider a Vietnamese noodle salad fancy food. It's, it might sound interesting to you because maybe you've not had one, but if you know this dish, it's very, very veg loaded and herb loaded and beautiful. But the act of knowing you're going to cook a meal, looking forward to it, making it in a very simple way, and then having that finished dish in front of you, and then without getting too hippie, consuming something that you've made for yourself, I think is so incredibly powerful. And I see lots of people, and I do charity cooking lessons, and when I see the buzz that comes off them, I've made that, I've accomplished that. That's given me confidence. It's really quite infectious. So I just think it's like that one dish, like whatever that one recipe is that will get you into it is the way to do it. And I know loads of people that get into it, fall off the bandwagon because life takes over, work takes over, it's hard to shop. And then they get back into it and they go, oh, this is why I do it. And I think quite a lot of the time it comes down to soups and stews. I love a soup and stew. As much as we're talking about salads, because it's hot, grounding soups and stews that are nourishing and comforting, that if you have a freezer, you can put in the freezer. And if not, sharing with people. Your neighbor.
Oh, you just took the words out my mouth. I think it's also about sharing. It's sharing a delicious meal with someone or your family, or, like what you used to do when you were younger, cooking for friends. And I think there's a real pleasure in also, and I don't say this from because I'm the greatest cook in the world, but watching people enjoy your food.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get this, you love what you do. You love cooking. And I always say this, and I've banged on about it in the last season, but when something has been made with love. And I think that's so incredibly important for the cook and also for the receiver, if we want to call it a receiver. But,
it's an exchange of love, isn't it?
Ways. Exactly. It's our currency. It's our currency.
It's our currency.
In a future life, when we are allowed to resume to some sort of normalcy, where are some of your favourite restaurants that you can't wait to go back to?
Ooh, I am really looking forward to going to Silo in Hackney Wick. There's two places I love in Hackney Wick. Silo, which is a zero waste restaurant that was 5 years in Brighton, and just next door to it is Cornerstone, which is predominantly a fish seafood restaurant and is absolutely gorgeous. All you West Londoners, make the effort.
Boy!
Make the effort to go. Oh, and speaking of West London, love Orisay, which is Jackson Boxer's place, which is your way. I love Stony Street in Borough Market. Sarap, I mentioned, the Filipino restaurant.
I'm going to go there.
You're going to go there?
We're going to go together. I'm going to have to go with you.
We're going to go together. Let's not just talk about London, obviously. I'm looking forward to going to Tommy Banks's place, Yorkshire Way. I'm looking forward to going to Coombs Head Farm, Devon Cornwall borders. I'm looking forward to going back to Riverford and River Cottage, two places that I absolutely adore, and they always have summer festivals and things that I love. I'm looking forward to going to the Hidden Hut pop-ups in Cornwall and Porthscatho. I can't wait to go to the Isles of Scilly, which is my happy place, and eat crab sandwiches there. Do you know what? I'm gutted. Myself and Sky Gingle, she has two restaurants at Heckfield Place in Hampshire, and we were going to cook together and do an event together. And that was supposed to be the week after lockdown. So I think we're going to reschedule that for September. I think Sky Gingle is an absolute legend, and should say her restaurant, Spring at Somerset House, is single-use plastic free.
Oh, wow.
So that's quite exciting.
Absolutely. She's ahead of her time.
It's a legend.
Very good for her.
I think one of the great things that we'll do, and I've always been drawn to restaurants that do this, and lots do this naturally anyway, is we'll start to see restaurants more and more and more write their menus based on what's available and with shout outs to suppliers. And I think that's so important. And I've always loved seeing that because I fall more in love with the food if I know the story behind it. I kind of am not into and don't need the description of the dish. I don't need like the adjectives and the flowery words because I'm impatient. But I will always move towards a dish on the menu that says this is from, because you know when someone's proud of their menu, they'll shout out their suppliers. And I'm talking about food and drink. And, you know, that for me makes a restaurant special, when you can tell that they care about what's going on behind the scenes and they want you to know what they're doing.
Wow, what a lovely way to end the interview on. I always finish the interview with a few quick fire questions. So are you
Let's do
ready?
it. Yeah.
My favourite snack of all time, which will no longer come as a surprise to you, is a packet of crisps. I could literally swim in a pool of crisps.
What flavour?
What is your... No, hold on a second.
Sorry.
I will tell you mine once you've told me yours. What is your favourite flavour of crisps and why?
Salt and vinegar, because I told you I love sour. I love sour and tangy. Is that yours?
Well, is there a particular brand that you like? Because there are very different salt and vinegars out there. I'm very specific.
No. I'm not really like, my boyfriend loves crisps. There's always loads of crisps. I'll just eat whatever. I don't really know because they're brought to me in a bowl with the gin and tonic next to them.
My favourite packet of crisps is a pickled onion Munster Munch.
Oh my gosh, that is a great flavour.
Yeah, I mean, it's dirty.
Anything pickled, I love. Yeah.
Exactly. I kind of sort of figured it's pickled, so it's probably a little bit healthy somewhere in there. What is the craziest food you've ever eaten?
In Tokyo, I can't remember what it was, but I feel like it was the eyeball of a
What?
fish. I mean, I don't.
They're meant to be quite nice, fish eyeballs.
I think it was very cold. I remember the texture more than anything. I mean, I don't. It's funny because people have different standards of what they think is weird. Like my favorite part of the prawn is sucking the juice out of the prawn head. Do you agree?
My dad loves that. No, my dad loves it, and I can't do it.
He is my birthday twin, isn't he?
Oh yes, he is. So you are. You're both September babies.
You can let him know that we thought about him when we were talking about sucking prawn heads. But you know,
he will be honoured.
That's my favourite part of the prawn. It's funny, isn't it? Because food does have fads. So things that we would have found weird now, like I grew up eating kimchi and sauerkraut, and that to other people was really weird. And now everyone loves kimchi and sauerkraut, and it's become very universal. I like knowing that when, you know, if the next generation come along, nobody will ever feel like they have to be shy about their family's heritage, because people will be like, wow, what is that? As opposed to, ooh, it's a bit different. Yeah.
What's been your most memorable meal?
Oh, the one that sticks out too, Queen's Head Farm, which is just the best place ever. And you've got to really book them in advance. When we were there, there was a 70th birthday, and you know, half the restaurant was taken up with a family of 3 generations, and there was a little kid at the table till 11 o'clock, and I just love that there. And then we went from there, Devon, down to Cornwall, and I ate a meal with Simon Stallard, who runs the Hidden Hut. He's got a cafe with his wife, and they do pop-ups on the beach like once a month, and they just have long tables, and you get whatever the catch of the day is. There was dogs running around, and I just thought, I am so lucky.
What is the food you eat the most of?
I mean, can vegetables, as the whole bracket of veg be on there?
Yeah.
I would say vegetables and herbs. I really eat a lot of herbs, and they're the only things I'm growing successfully all year round. You know, I get to the stage now where I'm so lazy. If I can't be, and hot, if I can't be bothered to fry an onion, which actually, I say that is, I feel like frying an onion is almost as relaxing as doing 10 minutes of yoga for me. And I'm not taking the piss. I mean, I absolutely love yoga, but sometimes when I'm stressed, I'm like, shall I do 10 minutes of yoga, or shall I fry and chop an onion for 10 minutes? Sometimes it's the onion.
I think I've just reached a whole new level within quarantine, and we now are bonding over sauteing and softening an onion in a pan.
It gets me every single time.
Lastly, but I think most importantly, live to eat or eat to live?
Live to eat!
Bravo! Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It has been so enlightening just hearing, you know, your views about topics that are really current and really important, but also approached in a very fun and versatile way.
Big V. There's that big V again.
You can follow Melissa on social media at melissa.hemsley, and please go and purchase the book Eat Green. In fact, go and purchase all of her books, which are out now.
Oh, Hannah, you absolute legend. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and joining me this week. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend and another and maybe another. Don't forget to follow all the crazy sexy antics on Instagram at Crazy Sexy Food. And please visit the Crazy Sexy Food YouTube channel, where you will find the food show, how-to videos, interviews, and everything in between. Until next time, goodbye.